Welcome everybody to our next Road to Residency webinar. We are talking about ERAS applications as well as interviews tonight. I'm Ashlee Bolger. For those of you who have not attended one of these, I am the host for this year. I am coming to you from Cincinnati, Ohio, where I'm the program director for the combined PEDS rehab residency program, and then I also serve as medical student director as well. Um, and I have an amazing panel with me, including some residents as well as faculty. So I'm going to kind of call them out in the order that they are appearing on my screen and let them introduce themselves. And then we'll get started. So Diana, you are next to me. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dianna Nguyen. I'm a PGY2 at UTHealth Houston.
Love it. And then Adam.
Hey there, everyone. I'm Adam Lamm. I'm the program director at Mary Free Bed in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the division chief at Michigan State College of Human Medicine.
Love it. And then Ravi's next.
Hi, I'm Ravi Kasi from Rush in Chicago. I'm the program director here.
Perfect. And then I've got Drew, last but certainly not least.
Hi everyone, I'm Drew Redepenning. I'm a PGY3 resident at UPMC in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Awesome. And then last, I should have said last but certainly not least, but I'll also introduce Amy, who is our AAP representative and who makes everything run for these webinars and does all the behind the scenes work. So I'll say it a few times, and she always knows this, but thank you, Amy, again, for keeping this going and making sure it gets done. Because you know you're not going to be able to fully depend on us. So, but without that, so just in case you guys haven't been here, we had a bunch of pre-submitted questions. I've pulled questions that come up year after year that I've sort of embedded as well. So I'll sort of serve as moderator and pose some questions to our panelists. Please feel free to use the chat if you have additional questions or if something sparks another question that you hear discussed. We're going to try to answer those in the chat as well. Afterwards, everything will get posted on the AAP website, including a summary of the chat as well. So hopefully this will be amazing and helpful, and I'm sure it will be. So let's see, to get us started. So we're talking about ERAS applications and interviews. So I'm going to try to focus on more of the ERAS applications first. But let's go with one of the first questions I got was, what is the typical timeline for programs reviewing applications and then offering an interview? If anybody wants to comment on that.
So I can start. So it's an N of one for me on the Mary Free Bed side. I would say that we sometimes will start reviewing kind of first day that the program or that the applications are available for us to review, which is usually the last week in September. Traditionally, it's usually a Wednesday. The website often crashes that day and is really slow. So it's not a day that I really plan on reviewing a ton of applications. For us, we kind of review in waves, and then we issue usually a couple different waves of interview invites that usually come out over the middle to end of October, I would say, is kind of our usual. And we follow the AAP guidelines on giving every applicant clear information on their status with the program. So we usually make some posts on our social media about when those are going out. We let those who are getting interviews get those invites in waves. Again, it's not necessarily first preference, second preference for invites. It's just kind of how we bulk review. And then let those who are on wait list know their wait list status, and then those who were unfortunately unable to offer an invite to, which really has truthfully more to do with the number of interviews and that we have available as opposed to those people not being suitable candidates. We let them know that in turn as well. So I think a lot of us are doing that now, and I think it's different than when I applied, but it's definitely better, I would say.
Hey, this is Ravi Kasi from Rush. For us, I think most programs do it in at least a couple of waves, one or two, with the amount of signals that you're going to get this year. I think you're going to get at least two waves with most programs, sometimes more. Just remember, a lot of programs are doing a transparency statement, so they'll let you know kind of around when they're going to be offering interviews. And so for us, we do it in about two waves, and We try to get out, the first set of interviews by the end of September, and then hopefully by the middle of October, we get the next wave. I would encourage people, if you don't hear by the middle of October, just sending a nice, carefully crafted email that is short and sweet and not templated, but shows some level of interest and understanding of the program, would be of benefit. Of course, if you have an in at the program by knowing a resident or a faculty member, you can always just kind of nudge them that way. But just be careful of not sending out a blasted email, because we will just kind of ignore it, unfortunately, if it looks very much templated.
Yeah. And I think for me, I have a unique experience of doing the combined program, but I'm also involved with our PM&R side. I would say that what you guys had both said sort of mimics what our PM&R program does. It's usually over the first 2 to 3-ish weeks, with the aim of getting, a good chunk of interviews out within a couple weeks, but it's usually a couple batches. For me at the combined program, it's a little different. We have a much smaller number, so not as nearly as overwhelming as my colleagues on this call and across the country. But it's also unique in the fact that usually, at least for us, and I think I can speak for most of our other programs, we're having to get our interview list cleared from multiple groups of people, because it is, interviewing across a PM&R program, a PEDS program, and then PEDS rehab. So I don't usually get to do any sort of batches. I don't have wait lists. I have a very finite number of interview slots that I can offer. And unless somebody declines an interview, you're usually not coming off, any sort of wait list. But we try to do the same thing in terms of transparency. And, once our interviews go out, send, hey, I'm sorry, we can't offer you one this year emails, but just a little different process than those who are getting very large number of, applications each year. So, this is probably a great follow-up question. So, and Robbie, you kind of alluded to this, but I don't know if anybody else had any other thoughts, but if you don't receive an interview when invites go out, is there anything you can do to secure one later in the cycle?
I'm happy to maybe fine tune what I said. I think you can certainly send an email. That's the least that you can do. I'd really emphasize on keeping it short and sweet, because we do get inundated with multiple emails just saying, we are interested in the program. Really just try to be very specific of what you like in the program, maybe highlighting something that makes you very unique. Whatever that might be. I don't want to even give any examples to say that there's some level of favoritism of one type of characteristics over the other. The benefit of that is if you do have some level of impression that you've left positively, for us, for example, that gets forwarded to our program coordinator for us to re-review the packet to potentially put them on the wait list. So, if you're not offered an interview, that it may help nudge you to being able to be put on the wait list. Or if they're in the middle of the review, they can at least state, well, if all things are equal, this one person at least expressed to us some level of interest. So amongst the 5 that look the same, this one person is very serious, so let's offer them an interview. So it's timeliness, so don't wait too long, don't do it too early, be professional, do it once, keep it short and sweet, and then just hope that the match gods are in your favor.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. Without playing favoritism between different organizations too, we've had some ability to connect at some of the national conferences and things like that too. So that's another way to kind of get some potential face time with programs as well. So if you're planning to go to any of those, and there's a residency program that you're interested in, that can be a good opportunity to chat one-on-one and get a little bit of discussion time, which can be helpful. But I think from an email side, I think was really well said. I think trying to avoid that batch email, I think is really important. Our coordinator receives a lot of those. We receive a lot of those across the board. And so those ones that show sincere interest, I think definitely mean a little bit more.
Dianna or Drew, did you guys get any great advice for this, or anything that you did you felt like might have gotten you a few more?
I think, if anyone's so I couples matched with my wife who's in neurology. So I think one thing, for those who are going through the couples match process, if one person gets an interview invite and you have not got one, definitely you email the program director at the institution, and just let them know that your significant other got an interview there and that you're obviously both interested in going to that program. And then have your significant other reach out to their program director as well. And then they can hopefully communicate over. I think that helped too with the interview process to make them aware, and then also help us both get interviews at the same places.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Because sometimes it's not that we don't, you know, it's just like we look over it and it's this little blurb on the application, and I think that's great advice.
I don't have anything to add to what's already been said. I agree to just keep if you do send an email to the program you really want an interview, to just keep it as genuine as possible and keep it short and sweet.
Let's see. I'm sorry. I'm looking through my list of things. Okay. So what do I do if I get an invitation for an interview from a, in quotes, backup program, but I still want to wait more time until I hear from my more desired programs? What do you do?
My goodness. I think that this is something that we've all faced. I don't want to speak for the other PDs on the call or residents, but I think this is something that we've all kind of faced. I think the key to it is once you can be pretty confident that that's not an interview that you want to keep. I think being as transparent as possible, being polite about it, but letting that program know, because your time is valuable. Our time in our interview slots are also valuable. And so, thinking about your fellow co-applicants, that's a spot that somebody else who may be more interested in that program could take, and maybe more interested in them, just on that same line of, how do you get off of a wait list or show interest, right? There's a lot of those people in that position. And so I think, making sure that you have the interviews at programs that you're comfortable with is really important. But if it's somewhere that you're pretty confident isn't somewhere that you want to go, just letting them know as quick as possible, politely as possible. We get it, right? And I think it's all about making sure that you go to the best program as well. We certainly don't want you to match somewhere that you don't want to go either. We're all going to be future colleagues in the future. So
Hey, so this is my philosophy on it. I don't like the word backup program. Now, I know that's what the question had been framed as, but that is language that students use. And I would not apply to a program that you do not want to go to, only apply to programs that you do want to go to. So there's no such thing as a backup program in my eyes. Now, I think there's a perception that certain programs are desirable, which is great. But I like to use the analogy of the NFL draft. I watch the NFL draft every year, and it's not every person at Alabama, Ohio State that make it to the NFL. There's people that go to all different types of programs, schools, and they make really great careers out of their lives. And that's the same for you all. So if you get an interview at a program that you think may be a good fit, there's nothing wrong with you taking it. I would not view it as a backup program, because then that frames the way that you look at that program if you did match into it, right? And then secondly, most of these programs are going to give you a time limit. So you may have 48 hours to pull the trigger on it. And if you don't, then that interview is gone. So if it is a good program, which I think the far majority, and I think all programs, maybe I'm biased, are good programs, you can take it. If you do run into a problem with, the quote unquote top program in your eyes that's in your backyard that now gives you only one spot and it conflicts with this program's interview, then that's a separate question that I'm sure is going to be asked. But for the most part, I think if you get an interview and you've got 48 hours, take it, because that other program will likely have some flexibility on the dates, especially if they want to interview you.
Yeah, and I agree. I think I mean, the biggest thing is you definitely want to match into when you're applying into PM&R. So it's hard to say what interviews you will and won't get. So I think accepting an interview initially is completely fine, even if it's not like your top program. But as you go through, and if you are getting more interviews at programs that are ones that are more desirable, and you know that there's a program that you don't want to match in, if you schedule a little bit later, it is more respectful to drop out of that interview and email the program just so someone else can get that spot. So, but at first, I think there's no problem with accepting interviews, as long as you're careful later about knowing if you don't want to go to a program to drop those if you don't actually want to go to that program.
And I don't know, Dr. Bolger, if this is one of your future questions or not. I think that the signaling increase from 8 to 20, I think will play a role in this to an extent that on the program side, there's probably going to be a little bit better clarity on interest of applicants for that program. And I think on the applicant, the program side as well. I think last year in talking with some colleagues, the challenge was if you didn't get a signal from an applicant, I know there were some questions in the chat about this too. I don't know if, just playing odds, if I was program number 9 and just missed getting a signal, or if playing odds people apply to 35, 40 programs and I was number 34. So I think now by going to 20 signals, I think that that part becomes a little bit clearer in terms of interest. And so that may play some role in how many interviews people are granted for signaled versus non-signaled from programs. I think this year we'll kind of have to see. I think, just knowing the numbers and the odds last year, your odds of getting an interview were about 3.5 to 4 times higher for the signal versus not. My guess is that that proportion is going to be even higher this year than it has been in past years. And I think that that kind of helps to this question of, if you're getting for on the program side, we're probably not offering too many interviews, maybe certainly not 0 to non-signaled applicants, but I think it's probably less, which will probably decrease the turnover in interview accepted versus declined down the road.
Yeah. I think that's a really great, I saw that chat starting, so I was going to actually go there as sort of the next topic content area. So nice transition. I don't know if any others have, comments on this. I know Dianna and Drew, Dianna's been part of a working group that brought, big signals as well as a couple other things to fruition, alongside myself. But I think, we don't know ultimately what the data is going to show. I think, if you extrapolate from what other specialties who sort of had similar patterns of kind of slowly increasing over a few years and then ultimately going to big signals, I would say it echoes what Dr. Lamm said. It's probably going to be a pretty big difference between, your rate of interview with programs you signaled versus not. But the flip side of that, hopefully, and what the goal is with big signals is it disperses it over more programs, right? Because if you have a smaller number of programs, you by default only can give a love letter to, a smaller number of programs. And so when you look at the spread, you've got, your top, whatever you want to call that, few programs that are getting just bombarded with signals and everybody's signaling them. And then you've got programs towards the tail that may get a couple signals. And so in the past, those two ends of the spectrum are going to use signals very, very differently. So people that are getting, let's just say 700 applicants and 550 signals, they may not even use signals. I don't know. I can't speak for them because that is certainly not my programs that I'm involved with. Transition down to the other end, it might look a little bit the same because they have so few signals that yes, they can offer everybody that signals them an interview potentially, but they're going way outside their bucket because they have to. And so hopefully with the bigger signals, it'll spread things a little more evenly. It's not perfect. And hopefully we'll have some data over the next several years. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that at all.
I think my only thought on it is you have 20 signals, how many programs are going to seriously look at a candidate who did not signal them? And so I think the main question that students ask this year that I do not have a great answer to is, do I need to apply to more than 20 programs? Because if they are filtered out because they didn't offer a signal, and then they say, program X, I really love your program, and they know that you didn't signal, then we're clearly the 21st or below program. So why would we bother, right? That's just kind of the mentality that may exist. I'm not saying that it will. And so I think this is the great unknown. So you really be strategic with your 20. Don't do 20 aspirational programs. Really focus on 20 programs that are a good fit that you believe that you're a good candidate for, which you can probably get some good advice on.
Yeah, I agree. I think reflecting on like what your priorities are and trying to match those with where you're putting your signals, and that's going to be different for each and every person. You know, some people may want or need to prioritize a geographic location. Some may or want to prioritize very large programs, very small programs. You know, it's kind of up to you. Each person needs to figure out what that looks like for themselves. But I agree. I think, you know, having some conversations with a trusted person, I think is super helpful. Again, I'll go back to like the data that other specialties sort of show, you know, in terms of that. You know, it is pretty, you know, it is pretty unlikely. And I think, you know, in the data, like usually what happens is this first year, everybody still has these really high. I applied to, I don't know, I think we were at like 40 or 50 average applications per applicant. I don't remember exactly. But then it usually drops off after people figure out that they're probably not going to get an interview, or at least not highly likely. And that's part of the thought behind bigger signals as well, is saving you all that are applying cost, and not feeling like I have to apply to every single PM&R program in the country to get, you know, my set number of interviews, which can get very, very expensive. And we realize that. So. Other things that kind of fell in that I got questions about into like the signaling kind of picking programs type thing. Does anybody have any thoughts on geographic signals at this point in the life of geographic signals? How do you use them? Are they helpful? What should I pick?
I think, and this is just my gut telling me, is that when we had just a low number of actual signals, then geographic preference could be another thing, where you said, like, we're in the Midwest, so you picked 4 Midwest programs that you liked, but you could maybe justify, hey, I'm still a Chicagoan, a Midwestern person, so this is where I want to be. I think now that the signals have increased, at least for us, we probably will de-emphasize the geographical preference. Maybe that might be something if you didn't signal to us, but you're still a geographical preference, that argument of I'm a Midwest person, obviously for us specifically, may carry some weight, but I don't know how much we're going to really worry about geographic preference when a lot of programs are going to be overwhelmed with just the signaled applicants.
100% agree. And I would say the same for the kind of like urban versus rural versus suburban. I feel like for PM&R, most PM&R programs are going to be in an urban to somewhat urban environment, just by nature of needing to be affiliated with a inpatient rehab hospital with enough patient volume and EMG volume, et cetera. And so that, at least for me, isn't something that I've looked at in the past either.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to bunch a few like questions that are a little bit more specific to like smaller groups, but I think very important questions, and I loved them. As a DO student who has only taken level 1 and level 2, so COMLEX, how does your program view this? Is there an advantage to those who take both step exams and level?
Not for us. We look at step on its own, or USMLE for our allopathic residents. We certainly don't require a USMLE for osteopathic students. And I'd be curious some of the other program director perspectives on here, because I've had some questions from osteopathic applicants of, should I still take USMLE level 1, even though it's pass fail as an osteopathic student, to have that extra data point? And I personally, I don't know that it's too helpful, at least in my decision making. I'd be curious what the others on the call think and feel about that.
I think our field was very much osteopathic friendly early on. And so I think our field just has a lot of osteopathic physicians. So I think for us and a lot of people, I just think one or the other. You know, I think it's data is data. You took your complex and it tells you this is the minimum score, this is where you rank, the percentile. That is as good as gold for us. So I wouldn't waste your time. This is my personal thing, so don't quote me on it. But I think a good complex score is the same as a good USMLE score. either you did well or you didn't do well. That's all.
And if you're interested, the AAP Physiatry Online Directory, which basically is a program directory that all the residency programs, be it coordinators or PDs, fill out kind of a profile on. That's one of the questions for each program is, do you require USMLEs? And there's a few different options you can choose from. So you can certainly go on there and look. But I think my recollection is if there was even one, there was not many that said, you had to have USMLEs or you highly recommended or something like that. It was very, very, it doesn't matter for most programs. How do we feel about the scores for step 2? What is our importance? How do we view that in like kind of the grander scheme of application review? Sorry, I'm asking the hard-hitting questions these days. I'm just, let's see what we get.
Truthfully, I mean, I don't want to always be the first one to answer, but I don't truthfully know how to interpret it. So if anybody else does, please let me know. I feel like it's one of these where a high score tells you that that person's probably really good at taking tests, which may or may not translate to being a good resident. But I think it's just one data point, and it's certainly an imperfect one. And so, at least for us, we're not making interview or not interview decisions based on a high or a low step score. We've interviewed people who have failed a step exam. We've matched people who have failed a step exam. And they've been great residents. And so I think it's just one data point, but I think good or bad, it doesn't define you as a person, and it doesn't define the decision that I make about your application.
I think I would look at this saying there's a lot of old school people and new school people. Old school people are impressed by a step score or a complex score, and new school just don't think that scores matter. And so you just have to know your audience. A lot of programs will probably have a mix of old school and new school people. That's what we do when we review them. I will tell you that a really good step score, it does make you think like, oh wow, this person's got to be really smart. And so you're going to look through the rest of the application to be able to state, is this confirmed by other people in the letter of recommendation in terms of they were the best student ever? Okay, like they're not only smart but really good clinically. But it does matter. Now, if you're someone that didn't do that well, and let's say there's a failure, that also doesn't mean that people are going to look at you and saying, "Oh my gosh, worst student ever." Same thing applies. We're going to look at those letters of rec that said, "Gosh, this was one of the best students that we've ever had." And then I look at their CV and they've got all these great PM&R activities, these extracurricular activities, very neatly written about what it meant to them. That also matters. So we won't define you one way or another. So I think we look at those extremes, but we look at it with some level of care and some caution to ensure that it is a true statement or a wrong statement. And I think we've learned, and I think Adam will kind of attest to, is those sometimes I've looked at residents when I'm signing off on their final summit evaluation. So when they're graduating and I have to put up their step scores, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh gosh, this person didn't score all that well and they're the best resident ever. Or some that scored really high, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go yell at them now. They've been just like doing so bad on their in-service exam for the last 4 years, telling me they're a bad test taker. I'm like, such a BS. I should have checked this. So it's such a wild card.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. And
Totally agree.
And I think that point of kind of the new school versus old school, I think is a really valid point in this. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Okay. Again, sticking with the theme of specific smaller groups, I'm coming from a brand new DO school and I had to find a lot of my own opportunities in the field. Is it worth talking about this in interviews and applications? I was thinking maybe I shouldn't be drawing attention to the fact that I'm at a brand new program with no reputation or alumni connections. Thoughts?
I would absolutely bring it up in this regard, because you're setting the table of, hey, I may not have a lot of things in my CV, and this is the reason why. So if you start doing a lot more, a lot of these things are going to be innovative things to you, like first person to find a race medicine event, first person to start a PMR club at my school, and I connected this. There's a lot more that you can do. It's actually an advantage because you're the trailblazer for the program. So I'd bring it up. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we'll probably give you a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt that someone that I'm in Chicago. So if someone's at Northwestern or Rush or University of Chicago, I'd say you better know about PM&R, you know.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's one of those where we see enough applications that we kind of know the schools that have been around for a while, the newer schools as well. And I think that, talking about it in the ways that you've maybe contributed to either building an elective, building connections in PM&R, I think there's opportunities to represent what you've done to help build a little bit of an educational legacy at the school.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, are non-traditional applicants with work experience in medicine, not necessarily PM&R, viewed differently than traditional MS4 applicants? If so, how?
Um, Adam, I feel like, you were saying, like, I feel like I'm going first. I feel the same way by going first, but I don't mind. I think that's a two different questions there. So when you talk about work experience, it might be doing work between med school and or between undergrad and med school. So you might have had a gap before you did med school, or you might be referencing someone that maybe didn't match and then is now working. So for those that have a big gap between undergrad and med school, for people like me, I view it as a tremendous benefit because you have real world experience. You're probably a lot more, I shouldn't say a lot more mature. I think there's some level of maturity that exists. Adam almost had a spit take as I was saying that.
Yep.
But there is a level of maturity that may not exist for the candidate that went all the way through. And I'm speaking as someone who went all the way through. So I feel like it's okay for me to criticize that experience. So I do look at that and I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask questions during the interview to know what did you learn and what kind of sets you apart. Those that didn't match, that's a whole separate question. And what we'd want to see is, are you in medicine? I think that does mean something positively. What have you done to kind of explore PM&R or continue your interest in PM&R to help yourself match this year?
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same. We were talking the other day about you can almost tell sometimes the residents where like their first quote adult job is being a resident versus having worked in a business before. We've had some discussions of, what do you mean? Like there's like a set time that I have to be here in performance reviews. And it's like, yep, that's kind of part of a lot of different jobs. So I think that having, being able to tie it in, you'll be amazed some of the things that are like applicable in PM&R. And even if you worked in a more customer service facing industry, like that's a lot of what we do is relationship building, diffusing unhappy patients and family members. And so you'd be surprised for those who have had jobs before, like the things that are applicable and relevant. And so I would say as you're kind of preparing your application, if you're coming from that, I would almost guarantee that's something you're going to be asked about. So think about the ways that you can tie those experiences into what you've seen of residents that you've worked with, attendings that you've worked with, because I think you could pull a lot from your prior life experiences into your future as a resident.
Absolutely. Okay, my last really specific group of applicants. So for those who did not match PM&R either last year or previously, so either maybe they matched a PGY 1 year or they didn't match a PGY 1 year and they're doing some sort of gap year. Is there any advice that we have for them? How does that work? Are there things that you would like to see that you've heard people are like kind of looking at for those applicants? Any kind of advice? And Robbie had to step off, so now I'm going to be your back and forth, Adam.
Fair enough. So I'll start it so you don't have to answer your own question. I think one of the big things is, having some ongoing connection to the field and the specialty. So, for those who are taking a gap year, either trying to stay connected to either your home program or home department, working and contributing on whether it's a quality improvement project or a research project, staying engaged through AAP, AAPM&R. I think there's a lot of ways to stay connected to the field, but that's one of the things that we definitely want to see is that that was just kind of seen as a setback doesn't define you, but that you also what my chairperson said, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I think there's a lot of truth and wisdom in that. And so what you don't want to do is go into next application season doing the exact same thing that you did the year that it didn't work. And so I think talking with somebody, your advisors, if your home program is comfortable talking to you about what were some of the things that may have put you into the situation that you're in and how can you address those, I think is really important because it's a challenging road, but you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to be best prepared. So if it's, you went in with a light research portfolio, seeing what can you do to improve that. If you went in with not a lot of PM&R experience and maybe one letter that came in late from a physiatrist, what can you do to make sure that you're getting early letters and, maybe potentially trying to get a slow and those types of things. So I think it's really taking a look at why do you think, or why does somebody who's been through it think that you may have been in that boat, and how can you address those deficits going into next season?
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things I've been really impressed, so I've done a little bit of advising for a few students that haven't matched in their first year over the last couple of years. It's, I would say just blanket statement, it's becoming more and more common. So don't feel like you're alone.
Yeah.
I think a couple things that they have found helpful because I've had some meaningful relationships over that 1 year post, they didn't match, and kept in touch with them. But I think if you feel comfortable, and this is really more immediately after, I don't know that doing it now is going to be all that helpful, but if you're faced with this situation in the future kind of thing, reaching out to programs that you felt like were, I don't want to say nice, but like would give you some meaningful feedback for like, what do you think happened? So if you don't have a home program, just reaching
Mhm.
out to somebody you think could give you some advice for like what to do next year. So sort of what Adam was alluding to, but doing it more kind of like with the people that you interviewed with. You're not always going to feel comfortable doing that, and I recognize that, but I think a couple of my applicants got some really good advice from programs that they interviewed. They didn't reach out to everybody they interviewed at. They picked, two or three, waited a little bit after match day, but sent, a nice email. And I think that says a lot and shows a lot of maturity. And honestly, like I still remember who's asked me for advice of like what I could do differently, like 2 or 3 years down the road. Like I can tell you exactly who their names were and like at least basics of what we talked about. And I advise a decent amount of students. So I don't normally remember exactly what I talk about with that kind of, student and stuff, but I think that that's huge. But I agree, like staying connected somehow, some way to the field. And then I'm a big fan of not try. I mean, you're going to be able to tell on your application probably that you didn't match. And so owning that and like,
Yes.
whether it's in your personal statement, whether it's in your like, what is that? I'm drawing a total blank and having a brain freeze, but the little paragraph that like you had a challenge in medical school, I'm drawing a blank on the term for it.
Oh, meaningful experience.
Or yeah, meaningful experience or like something, or not even meaningful experience. It's another one that,
Oh,
it's the one that you can put one thing and it's like a little, I'm drawing a blank. It doesn't matter, but there's a little spot that you can say like, I had a challenge and this is how I overcame it. I would say that's a great place to put it too. Like, what did I do differently? What have I done this last year? And just own it. Like, we know this happens. It does not define you. There are lots of reasons people go unmatched. And many of the times it has nothing to do with you're not going to be a good physician. It just was, whether it's the match algorithm, whether, like Adam said, something random, like, you didn't get letters of rec in time, and that's not necessarily your fault. There's a lot of reasons that kind of falls into place. So um, I'm going to throw one to specifically the residents, because I feel like all of these have been ones that you have not been able to chime in on. But speaking of meaningful experiences, so you guys get the 3 meaningful experiences. What did you guys put in that little paragraph section? So what advice were you given? What did you end up putting there? How did you describe them? Any advice?
I think for me, I was I guess given the advice to like choose 3 that really speak or be able to convey like who I am as an applicant, who I am as a person, like what am I like passionate about and everything. And so I had to do a lot of self-reflection and chose 3 that I think would that I did most in. So I spoke about my volunteer work with underserved populations. I did a lot of research, and so I spoke about research as well. And yeah, I can't remember my third one, but that's how I approached it. So, oh yeah, being a dual degree student. How could I forget?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, mine similar. So I was told, I mean, pick things that you can talk a lot about that you're super passionate about, because that really conveys, especially in an interview, if you can really be passionate about something and something that you were very much involved in and had a big impact on your decision to pursue medicine, pursue PM&R. So that was kind of my biggest advice. One of the main things I had and wanted to talk about is, so I worked prior to medical school. And one of the big reasons I chose medical school in physiatry is I worked as an assistive technology specialist for multiple years, working with individuals with disabilities and helping them be more independent using technology. That's something I was super passionate about, something I'm still very much involved in, and I can talk endlessly about. So that's something I wanted to highlight in my application. And if we got on that topic, I knew that I could talk during the whole interview about that, and be passionate about it. So I think that's important, is just doing something you're passionate about and something that you've really heavily been involved in. If it was some volunteer experience you were involved in for like a day or a week, I probably would not put that down. But if it's something you were longitudinally involved in and something that you started, that's something that is, I think, a really good experience to put in there, because it's something you can talk really educatedly and passionately about.
Yeah, I think big thing on the meaningful experiences is making sure that they're like things that you want to talk about during an interview. And something that, let's say you have a really good interview season and you get 10 plus interviews, that you're not going to get bored talking about 10 plus times with different people. Because for us, it's our first time talking to you about it. For you, it may be your eighth or ninth time talking about it. So make sure that you pick things that you can still be passionate about when you talk about them with multiple programs, because that's usually where a lot of our conversation starters come.
Okay, for the last 15 minutes, I'm going to switch to more like interview-based questions. I know I haven't gotten to everything in the chat, but there are so many good questions that were either pre or currently submitted. So I'll try to keep answering as we go in the chat. But first question, how do you practice for interviews? And for residents, did you guys practice? What did you find helpful?
I think what was helpful for me through my school, we had some practice resources, but I think what helped me was some of the organizations, like the PM&R student organizations, hold like mock interviews and with the residents. I found that was really helpful, and also just practicing with your classmates, because we're all going through the same thing, and just finding that one or two friends to just practice the just questions and just that tell me about yourself question was also very helpful too for me.
Yeah, I think just like kind of reviewing, kind of thinking about the most common questions you'll be asked. Like you'll pretty much always be asked why PM&R, just like tell me about yourself, those types of questions. So being able to answer those questions especially, and then there's like lists out there of like common interview questions you might get. Some of them they'll pop up and be random questions. There's nothing you can do about it, but I think at least practicing and thinking about some of those common questions, and then also knowing a lot about the program before the interview is important too. So making sure that you review their page, go on their website, make sure that you pick out the things that interest you the most, so that you know what you need to ask questions about, and also know what you're interested in as well, and what specific questions you have for the program. Because it's as much as you figuring out if that program's a good fit for you, as they are trying to figure out if you're a good fit for them too.
Great. So what does a typical interview day look like?
So I think every program is going to be a little bit different. I would say that you should expect usually about 3 or 4 different interviews. Usually, I would say like 15 to 20 minutes seems to be probably the norm for most places. There's usually like a program overview beforehand, Sometimes it's like pre-recorded, but we've done ours live. Then kind of your 4 interviews, I would say should be usually program director, I would hope. Um, Usually a couple core faculty members, and then some will do kind of a chief resident interview, or some will do kind of have one of their rehab psychologists or somebody who's adjacent participate as well, kind of in that multidisciplinary team component. So I would say, expect 3 to 4 interviews, 15 to 20 minutes each, I would say is pretty typical for interview day. I think most all of us are planning to do Zoom interviews again. I know that's been kind of the guideline and recommendation. So we're planning to do that. It's worked pretty well on our side, and it keeps people on time more. And I say this as somebody who used to interview after coming after my former program director who always ran over. It's been nice to make sure that you can always stay on time a little bit better on Zoom as well.
Yeah, I'd say for remembering interviews, a lot of programs can do things. Some of them do things some similarly. Then you'll get various different things for programs. Like you'll have some programs where the interviews will kind of all be in a row. They'll be spaced out throughout the day. Usually it'll start out with a big intro to kind of an overview of the program. And then you'll usually interview with a PD or an APD, and then usually some other faculty members too. But in some cases, you might be interviewing with some of the like PGY 3, 4 residents, sometimes the chiefs. So it's really variable. And then programs, I think it varied from doing like 3 longer interviews to some programs I would do like 6 or 7 small interviews. So it varied quite a bit between programs. But in general, I think usually the norm is around like 4 or so interviews typically.
We talked about some of this. What is the best strategy if you're having technical difficulties during your interview? I always just say, call my program coordinator. You should have her cell phone. I don't know
Yeah.
what else, because it's happened to me as an interviewer. Like wherever I'm at, like it doesn't work. Like I don't just try to stay calm is my next thing, because we are not going to judge you based on technical difficulties.
Yeah, I think just kind of staying calm and collected. Don't get rattled from it. Don't it happens. Sometimes it's on our end. Our internet may kick us off. Sometimes it's on your end. We have had some where I finished the interview over the phone because the internet at the applicant's home went out. So I think it's just being flexible, right? There's a lot of ways to get the information, and I think too, although it's not part of our traditional interview day, seeing how somebody responds to that kind of adversity, like are you someone who kind of rolls with the punches and says, "Yeah, it's okay, we'll make up the time," or are you somebody who gets really upset or flustered by it? It kind of shows a little bit about you. So I'd say just kind of stay calm. We'll figure it out. Definitely call or text our program coordinator. Uh, they're the ones who keep me in line, so they can help get you back in shape too.
Yeah, I agree. Don't it's I think the top my like favorite programs I remember one of them my internet completely went out, so I had to call over the cell phone, and then another program that my interview was super spotty, so I barely heard some of the questions coming in too. So yeah, but don't like freak out, because as long as you're honest with them over the phone, be like, oh sorry, my internet went out, or my internet's a little bit spotty. Everyone's pretty cool with it. It's normal to have issues, especially when we're doing things web based.
Is it recommended to have a normal background, a blurry background, or a fake background?
I don't know if go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
From my experience, I had a normal background, and I had I guess where I was positioned, I had my cat's pictures in the background, and that was like a talking point sometimes. So I guess that worked for cat lovers and everything. But I don't think I've heard any programs say that they have a preference over blurred or normal or any certain backgrounds.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just about having a background that's professional and neat sometimes if you're like interviewing from like, say your hotel room or something like that because you're traveling or at a conference. I think, blurred background may be better in those circumstances just so that, we're not looking at like your hotel room bed or something. But I would say just like use judgment there. If you have a neat background, it doesn't need to be blurred. If it's, somewhere where having a blurred background may just help make things less distracting, then go for that too.
I think as long as it's professional. I mean, I've never
Yeah.
seen anybody do this, but I mean, you could certainly go very unprofessional. And I think that might be a faux pas.
It's
Because then I'm
it's
just gonna assume the worst. But
we've had that a couple times. It's really rare. But we can share war stories offline.
I love it. Um, what rules do programs typically have to follow regarding questions or communications? And I'll add like post-interview mostly. What did you
Mm.
guys?
So I would say that we're bound both by the kind of match agreement on our side as are the applicants. And I would say that, obviously any questions about protected status, race, ethnicity, orientation, religious background, family, family planning thoughts, any of those types of things I would say are off out of bounds questions. We also can't do anything where kind of pressuring you into ranking us a certain way or asking where you're ranking us or asking who else you're interviewing with. Those are all kind of unfair questions. And I would, try to handle it delicately if you're in a situation where somebody asks you that, but definitely talk with an advisor, a trusted person at your medical school or somewhere about how to handle the afterwards of that, because those are not questions that programs should be asking you on an interview or in post-interview communication. That said, if it's something that you want to bring up, you certainly can. So we've had residents who have asked, hey, does anybody in the program have kids or has anybody had kids in the program? So you're always able to volunteer that information yourself. And we've kind of instructed our interviewers to be as careful in kind of answering just that question and not fishing for more information. But if an applicant brings up something, because it's a really fair question, if you are thinking of, what supports are available if you have kids who get sick or something like that, it's a fair question. So make sure that you get the answers that you want to it. So we instruct to answer a question if asked, but not to dig beyond what's asked.
Yeah, and
Okay.
if you send an email to a program and you like after an interview and you don't get email back, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. Some programs don't interview people, don't send emails back. Um, like I think our program doesn't typically, and so certain programs internally has rules and stuff like that they follow. So if you email a program saying you really like your interview and everything and you don't get email back, I wouldn't think about it too much.
I have time for a couple, maybe two, maybe one. Eh, What are some typical or common questions that every med student should have an answer to? We kind of talked about why PM&R, so I'm taking that one off the table.
I think the YPM&R, why that program in particular, and I think if you can speak to specifics, I think something that, is kind of beyond the front page of a website, I think matters a fair amount. I think another is, if you have a particular direction within PM&R that you might feel a pull towards, I would say something to know. It's not that you have to know what direction you want to go in PM&R too. It's totally fine to say, I've only had a couple rotations. I'm super passionate, but I know there's parts of the specialty I haven't even seen yet. But what it can do is it can help us feel out like, are you looking for something that our program has a particular strength in, or is it something that our program maybe isn't particularly strong in? Because we want to feel out, can we provide what you need to be successful and help you meet your goals? And so, one example is if you said you really want to be a global health physiatrist and my program doesn't have a global health track, you're probably not going to be as happy at my program as somewhere who has a global health track. So if there are like really specific things that you want in the future or that you want out of a residency program, I would say have an answer to those as well.
I think I
Yeah,
was
I think, oh, go
uh,
ahead, Diana.
I think I was asked what PM&R experience I have, like inpatient versus outpatient, and then what was like some of my exposures to PM&R. So that was some of the questions. And then what if not physiatry or if not in medicine, what career would I choose was one of the questions I got before.
And I was gonna say, I feel like there's a lot of folks that do like different like example based questions, like, whether it's like, tell me about a time that you had to lead a group, or, different like some of those traits that we're doing. So just having some like, I mean, I think you can find a lot of those type things on like forums and stuff, but, just having some idea of a few experiences that might touch on like leadership or difficult patients, or, different things that you just would expect a physician to potentially encounter in residency. I think that can be helpful. I don't know. I feel like I got a few of those many, many years ago, even, and those were I mean, I understand now why they're helpful and they're important, but at the time that was not my strength in answering those type of questions. So, they definitely, yeah, they were just harder for me to do in the moment. So,
Yeah, and I think to that, right, you're probably at some point on your interview trail going to get a question that comes a little bit out of left field or something that no matter how much you prepared for, that just was not a question that you were going to have in mind. I think that taking a second or two to kind of collect your thoughts and then answer before kind of I do this, I've done it tonight, where I kind of start talking sometimes before I fully thought it out. And so the interview, the question then starts to kind of wander. I think it's far better to take a second or two, collect what you want to say and then say it than to, talk circuitously.
I'm going to end things there because I just realized it's 9 o'clock. Or whatever time zone you're in, adjust for that. But thank you guys so much, panelists, Amy, for joining us tonight. I know this is giving up an hour of your evening, but I speak for all of us. I think most of us are very passionate about making sure that the correct or at least helpful information gets out there, and that the rumor mills aren't where you're getting your information from. So, I know, Amy has posted this, a couple QR codes. So I'll just put a plug in for these. So we've been doing this road to residency, I don't know, 4 years now. It was Dr. Cassie that started it. He was the originator of the whole thing. But I think we're in our third or fourth year at this point. But this is the first year we're trying to gather some feedback on like what's working and what's not working, or what you'd like to see. And so if we'd love to hear your thoughts, the good, the bad, the ugly. It'll help us adjust these for future years and continue to make them the amazing thing that they have turned into. And then certainly there are forums and whatnot, through the AAP for medical students. So if you're a member, there's a little QR code to continue the conversation. So we'll leave those up momentarily, but again, thank you guys so much to the panelists for coming. And thank you guys all students for joining us. I'll also put in a plug that this will be recorded. And again, the questions and the answers will be posted. I will also maybe there's definitely some questions we did not get to in the chat. You guys were awesome and we're totally on the chat this time. I'll try to answer if I feel like I have a good like general sense of what most people would answer. I'll try to add those when I do the chat and review the chat. Um, but check those out and then check out the previous Road to Residency webinars. There's lots of different topics, and you can kind of find what you need in those, fast forward through the parts that you don't need. Lots of good stuff in there. So with that, I will say thank you one more time, and it was great getting to talk to you guys.